The sun. It's the Earth's primary source of energy, providing it with heat and light. Two of the main ingredients for sustaining life. But without the protection of our ozone layer, the Earth would not be able to withstand the heat and radiation from the sun.
Essentially, the ozone layer is a thin shield that's found in the upper atmosphere. And what this shield does is made up of ozone molecules, and it filters the UV radiation from the sun from coming directly to the Earth. And if we did not have this natural filter, we would have the UV radiation coming directly to life on Earth, causing things like skin cancer, eye cataracts, reduced immune system, defenses, and it would affect plant yield.
Although the ozone layer is subject to naturally occurring fluctuations in its thickness, the last 50 years have seen unparalleled damage because of man's intervention. Now, there's a hole in the ozone layer above Antarctica.
And it's found in that region because it's so very cold. They're super cold clouds, and on the surface of these clouds, man-made chemicals that we have placed into the atmosphere, such as chlorofluorocarbons, known as CFCs, among others, react with the ozone molecules and break them apart, and that is what causes the hole to be formed. Now, although the hole itself is in the Antarctic, and we find it there 6 months of the year, because in the Antarctic there's 6 months of summer and 6 months of winter, so you have this cloud 6 months for the year, there's a general thinning of the ozone layer, and therefore the tropical region is also affected by this thinning. And again, because it's a filter for the UV radiation from the sun, and we have direct sunlight all the time, we will be particularly at risk. And we all hear a lot about climate change these days, and there is a link between ozone layer depletion and climate change, in that because plants take in carbon dioxide and let out oxygen, and carbon dioxide, the blanket of carbon dioxide around the Earth, is what causes global warming and therefore climate change. If you have damage to plants because of increased UV radiation due to a depleted ozone layer, you would therefore affect the amount of carbon dioxide that's sucked out of the atmosphere and increase climate change.
Additionally, ozone-depleting substances are all greenhouse gases that cause global warming and climate change.
Substances that deplete the ozone layer were first identified in the early 80s by scientists that were working in the Antarctic and discovered the hole in the ozone layer. And of course, anything that is bad had all of these wonderful properties. So a lot of these chemicals were cheap, were easy to find, had very little side effects, etc. And then they found out this huge environmental side effect that existed. So some of the chemicals include CFCs, chlorofluorocarbons, and HCFCs, hydrochlorofluorocarbons, both of which are refrigerants. So you would find this as the refrigerant gas that we would use in our domestic refrigeration units, chillers, the air conditioning units in our vehicles, those sorts of pieces of equipment.
One of the main problems with air conditioning refrigeration equipment as regards to the ozone layer is that most of the refrigerants that we use today are ozone depleting and have ozone depleting substance in them. So we have to start to phase them out.
So in an attempt to counteract the negative impact of ozone depleting substances like chlorofluorocarbons, or CFCs, hydrochlorofluorocarbons, HCFCs, halons, and methyl bromide, which is a fumigant, 196 countries around the world signed the Montreal Protocol, an international treaty which speaks to the phasing out and eventual elimination of these ozone-depleting substances. Trinidad and Tobago is a signatory to the protocol, and under the leadership of the National Ozone Unit, has already successfully phased out CFCs.
Trinidad and Tobago has led the initiative on reducing ozone-depleting gases in the Caribbean. As one of the most successful countries in this region, it has a lot to offer. The NOU is a very talented department within the Ministry of Planning, Housing and the Environment with very talented staff. Together we have been able to advance the whole issue of legislation, policy, strategies to reduce ozone-depleting gases.
I am very, very proud of the work of the National Ozone Unit. I believe that the unit, especially the ozone specialist, is, she's so passionate about her work, and it creates that environment for us to all support and to work behind her. And so for us, we feel very comfortable that our protocol, our obligations under the Montreal Protocol, well placed, the responsibility well placed and handled by the National Ozone Unit.
Formed in 1997, the National Ozone Unit has been charged with spearheading Trinidad and Tobago's phase-out of ozone-depleting substances.
The National Ozone Unit was actually established within the Environmental Management Authority in 1997, and the EMA then had the responsibility of ensuring that the process of design, implementation and monitoring of the work of the NOU was undertaken. In 2007, the NOU was transferred in terms of the lead personnel to the Ministry of Planning, Housing and the Environment. The Environmental Management Authority continues to play a role in terms of financial management for the NOU and the activities under the NOU, but also to assist in terms of education and outreach and to provide other technical assistance which might be required in terms of the work of the National Ozone Unit.
The National Ozone Unit's work requires a multi-pronged approach in both Trinidad and Tobago. They're involved in public education and awareness raising. Every year, they celebrate World Ozone Day on the 16th of September with a series of public activities. In 2009, they set up information booths around the country and held a gala dinner which recognized the important work of individuals working in the field and celebrated winners of a national poster competition. The NOU was instrumental in revising Trinidad and Tobago's negative list to include CFCs, so that companies that import things like fridges and air conditioning units, both of which contain ozone-depleting substances, have to apply for an import license through the Ministry of Trade and Industry. Customs officers have been trained in recognizing items that contain ODS to ensure that there is no illegal importation of CFCs. And one of the most successful elements of the National Ozone Unit's work has been its partnership with ARIA, the Air Conditioning and Refrigeration Industry Association. Together, they have trained over 700 technicians in retrofitting old fridges and air conditioning units, and the proper handling and disposal of CFCs.
I think the retrofitting and bringing in new refrigerants is doing the right thing, because we can see that apart from human, animals, plants, fish is being affected, and as a result the whole world will deteriorate. So we need to be more environmentally conscious and do our part by eliminating the CFCs and HCFCs that is in the air conditioning refrigeration industry.
It is important that we as a country stand behind our government and the Montreal Protocol which we have signed. This is a legal document that we have promised the world that we would phase out according to the Montreal Protocol, and the gases that we have phased out like CFCs in December 31st, 2007 have already been done, and we actually won an award for the speed at which our country did it. And also now HCFCs are 22 is on the chopping block, and we have 22 to 25 years to do it, but we need to do it because it will save the environment, it will save the earth. We need to look after ourselves. I have to look after my children and my grandchildren.
Having successfully phased out chlorofluorocarbons since December 2007, the National Ozone Unit is looking towards the next step.
There's a lot of work ahead for the National Ozone Unit, and although we have been very successful in what we have been mandated to do thus far, we still have a lot to do in that one of the alternatives to CFCs that was promoted was HCFCs, and although that chemical does deplete the ozone layer, it has a lower ozone depleting potential than CFCs. So the protocol agreed to let countries use it in the interim while CFCs were being phased out, and what that did is that increased the use of HCFCs. So in 2007 there was a landmark decision to accelerate the phase out of HCFCs. So now the National Ozone Unit will be phasing out HCFCs nationally through a similar phase-out process with a quota system, a licensing system, etc. And what we will be doing is really having what we call an HPMP, which is a HCFC phase-out management plan developed for the country, and we will use that as our roadmap as we continue our phase-out of HCFCs.
The phase-out is due to begin in 2013, and it will have a significant impact on carbon emissions. Every ton of HCFC-22 that is removed from the atmosphere is the equivalent of getting rid of the carbon dioxide emissions of 350 cars.
And many people within Trinidad and Tobago are of the belief that we are a small contributor to the issue of ODS, and therefore should we be imposing the types of restrictions in a small island state like ours. The reality is that it is an international issue, and Trinidad and Tobago has an obligation to the international community to do its part. Our population will be significantly affected by the issues related to ozone layer depletion, which includes issues such as skin cancers, eye cataracts, effects on agricultural plants and plants generally, as well as the issue of depletion of phytoplankton in terms of the ocean phytoplanktonic layers.
Illegal imports are always a challenge because you would find persons trying to bring in chemicals on the black market and try to sell, and sometimes they're not just selling in Trinidad, but they try to sell it up the islands as well. And because of where we are located, we stand as a very good transshipment point, so vigilance in that area is always a challenge, as well as to keep the public well sensitized, as well as the technicians, to ensure that they're doing the right thing and they know what is the right choice to make.
Although the hole in the ozone layer may seem like a very technical problem, there are things that everyone can do to make a difference. Make sure you're not using any aerosols that contain CFCs. Get a trained technician to retrofit your fridge or AC unit if it's old and giving trouble. Be sure your technician doesn't release refrigerant into the atmosphere. If you buy new appliances, read the labels to make sure they use ozone-friendly chemicals. You can also look after your own health by wearing sunglasses to help prevent eye cataracts, and always wear sunblock no lower than SPF 30 whenever you go outdoors to reduce your risk of developing skin cancer.